All right, good morning. How's everybody doing? Do we have the talent for the next generation in this room? And if not, why not? Let me start by acknowledging that we are on the land of the Gadigal people, and I want to recognize the traditional owners of the land and waterways and respect for the elders, past, present, and emerging. And speak to that point around past, present, and emerging and thinking about where are the next generation of leaders for the mining industry and for gold mining. Talent is a hugely important topic for this sector. This is a fabulous industry. We create so many of the products and services that make the world tick. We operate across the globe. We give enormous opportunity to people in the mining sector, and yet there are skill shortages. There is an industry that is historically significantly underrepresented by some parts of the broader community, and that really needs to make sure that it is adapting to be the industry that will be an employer of choice for generations to come. So the purpose of the panel today is to get a little bit more into why, and importantly, what can be done about it. And I think we heard even just from that last panel, some of the discussions around where the industry is heading, what it needs to do to make sure that this is an industry that is accessible and open to all, and really does encourage and nurture talent. I'm excited about the conversation because this is a really important topic for the industry, and thank you for joining us this morning. And look, we've got some great panelists. We're going to start thinking a little bit around diversity, inclusion, encouraging the right behaviors, and why this is important to the mining sector and why particularly in the gold mining sector. Michelle, give us your views. Why is this a topic that we should be talking about?
Thanks, Terry. Well, I think diversity, engagement, inclusion and belonging is definitely the right thing to do. It's certainly part of our responsibility to advance society and the world, but it also makes business sense to do it. And I think the research is compelling that diverse teams deliver better business outcomes, and workplaces that are engaged and inclusive attract and retain better talent. So for me, that's the business case. And I think with 21 years in the mining industry and a little sabbatical in between where I left the mining industry and came back, I think we can be really proud of the progress we've made, because we have made progress as an industry, but we've got a lot more to do. And I think there is so much opportunity really for leadership and culture to be the unlock for performance and growth in our industry.
Okay, so look, this is a statement we hear often: diversity is going to lead to better outcomes, and we'll come on to that because I think it's a really important point to drill into a little bit more about why that can be the case and the innovation that we heard about in the previous conversation. But let's just take stock a little bit of where we are. Kelly, I know Gold Fields has done some work in this area. Can you talk a little bit about the current landscape and the situation that I would say the mining sector as a whole finds itself in, but particularly some of the work that you've looked at from a Gold Fields perspective?
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, and I think, look, consistent with a lot of other organisations, we've, prompted by some quite concerning reporting regarding the sector, but also understanding that we needed to develop a much deeper understanding of what was going on in our organisation. We partnered with Elizabeth Broderick, who would be well known to many people in Australia, to do a really sort of deep dive into organisational culture, and particularly the experiences of both women and underrepresented groups in our organisation. And that was a piece of work that was done at every single one of our mines around the globe. The Broderick team spoke to people either individually or in group perspectives, and then provided us with this really sort of deep and rich feedback about what the experience of our people was in our organisation. And being, whilst we have clearly come some way, it is absolutely evident that we have a lot further to go. And quite frankly, some of those findings were deeply troubling to us as a leadership team. They give us a very clear steer as to where we need to go moving forward, but these are issues that are not unique to Gold Fields. They are industry issues, and a lot of the opportunity in moving forward is really how we approach them as an industry.
And can you just touch on that a little bit? I mean, you've been very brave in being so public around this, and you're not the only mining company that has done work like this. And I think we're seeing that trend of the mining industry and certain companies saying, all right, we're willing to be public and to put this out there. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking behind making this public and why you've decided to be quite so forthright about some of the challenges that exist?
Absolutely. So, we have published the Broderick team's report in full. We've made that available to all of our stakeholders as well as our people. We felt that that was really important in terms of trust being the foundation of our relationship with both our people internally, but also externally. And so in disclosing the report in full, we felt that that was a foundational piece in terms of building trust moving forward. But I think we also recognise that, these are industry problems. Not every organisation will have the opportunity or the resourcing to undertake work of that extent, so that by making it available, other companies can benefit from it. I think that there would be few companies that could look at that work and say, well, we don't have any of those issues in our organisation. So hopefully by sharing that work and the recommendations, it gives other organisations a good steer as to where they go, recognising that obviously the talent market is small. We are all operating within that market, and if we can work together in raising the bar, there's a real opportunity there.
And look, kudos to Goldfields for doing that, because I think it's a real position of leadership, and hopefully encouraging your peers to recognise and to acknowledge the challenges that, as you say, is an industry issue, and think about collective approaches as well as what individual companies are doing.
Absolutely.
Danielle, let's turn to the broader industry and skill shortages. And the ICMM obviously covers a broad range of mining companies beyond the gold sector. And we'll come back to gold in a little bit. Today, I've heard, is actually a day at IMARC, and kudos to you. IMARC organises where graduates are being invited in to join. If there are any graduates in the room, welcome. We're delighted you're here. What have you seen around where the skill shortages are in the mining sector, and what the mining sector needs to be thinking about in terms of, okay, how are we going to continue to have the skill sets we need and actually to drive innovation and creativity?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. So I think we've started to touch on them. I think there are 4 things that really stick out to me as influencing the skill shortage in mining. And, these things actually, maybe not specific to mining, but I think in mining they are having a particularly sizable effect. And obviously, the nature of work being one of them. So evolving the nature of work in mining to be much more focused on kind of automation and technology is definitely changing the nature of work and therefore the skills that we need for mining. I recently read actually that something like 1 in 16 workers, so I think that's estimated to be like 100 million workers, will need to be reskilled or to move into different jobs by 2030 as a result of this changing nature of work. So that's kind of one key driver, I reckon. Another one obviously is around workers' preferences, and we just heard from the previous panel actually a little bit about the kind of profound impact that COVID had on work and on how people feel about work. And I think what we have recognised out of that is that a huge number, I think it's something like 40% or more of workers after COVID indicated that they would plan to move into new jobs kind of as quickly as they could, to better align with their own personal preferences around how they wanted to work and what they felt they could get out of work. Obviously, the ways of working, we were talking about this before we came into the session today, where the majority of organisations now have adopted their remote or hybrid working arrangements as permanent arrangements, has really changed how we work and the skills that we need for work. And then I guess, maybe really importantly for mining, it's this thing about how workers want to work for employees that they trust, and in organisations, with which they share a sense of purpose. And so I think for me, for mining, that's perhaps one of the kickers, in that the skills shortage is likely being driven out of a combination of perhaps inconsistent performance by the mining industry on things that people think are really important, like diversity, equity and inclusion, like nature and the environment, like how we engage with and get the participation of Indigenous peoples into mining. So on those really important things. But then also maybe perhaps they don't quite understand the full swathe of opportunity for careers in mining.
So let's just dig a little deeper into that. This sense of purpose and what role does mining serve to society? Do you think the mining industry does enough to convey and help people understand? And where are those shortcomings? And and again, credit to IMARC for organising this. Saw parties of school kids walking through the conference floor, which I think is great. But where does the mining industry fall short in helping people understand the purpose of mining?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. You know, if I think about companies that are members of ICMMs or of the World Gold Council, you know, and I think about what efforts and lengths they go to engage in and set leadership positions on things that are really important. You know, again, thinking to the work that ICMM is doing at the moment on, well, recently, in fact, last year, or was it earlier this year? Gosh, time is going too fast. We released our first ever position statement on diversity, equity and inclusion. So setting out a range of member commitments that members of ours fulfil in relation to diversity, equity and inclusion. So, you know, things like that where we're really demonstrating kind of leadership or our desire to be leaders in areas like this. And not just diversity, equity and inclusion, but also things like, as I said before, nature, Indigenous peoples, you know, climate, a whole range of other things. So given all of that work is going into deep consideration into mining's contribution to, contribution to solving or to, contributing to improving some of these really important kind of value propositions for society and therefore for workers, I think that's something that we definitely could lean more into so that people understand. And, you know, maybe back at you, Terry, I mean, the Gold movie, I think it was just such a stroke of genius, and maybe you can take a minute to explain to people what was kind of the genesis behind that. But I think that's just such a brilliant move to, in a really creative and engaging way, start to tell the story of gold mining to a completely different audience, you know, with great A-lister rock star power to go alongside it.
It definitely helps if you get Idris Elba presenting. And for those who don't know, and thank you, Danielle, for that call out. For those who don't know, we, the World Gold Council, recently released a documentary, Gold: A Journey, with Idris Elba, where Idris goes on the journey of discovery, looking at this metal that he has worn, is aware of, but has never actually thought about where it comes from. And there's a screening this afternoon, so 2:30, far end, the Innovation Theatre. Please join us. It's also freely available on YouTube. And it really is designed to help engage a new generation, and indeed people that are just unthinking about mining. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is engage people that either perhaps have critical perceptions of the mining industry or just don't even think about where this metal comes from, and start opening the space for meaningful engagement. This is not trying to say the mining industry does everything right, because it doesn't. This is saying there's an interesting story here, and this is a critical industry that provides a lot of opportunities for people. Just talking about critical industries, Michelle, looking forward as you think about from an Oceana perspective and the talent needs that you are going to have as a company, where are you seeing skill shortages? Tell us about what you're thinking in terms of the capabilities that you're going to need to develop for your future workforce.
Let me build on some of the points that Danielle made. I mean, I think there's definitely change coming, and I think what we've seen from previous industrial revolutions is that change brings more opportunity and more jobs. And so there'll be more jobs to fill, and we'll need more skills. And I think that one of the secrets is going to be the ability to work across the talent life cycle and to deploy kind of multi-pronged strategies, looking at building our own talent, buying talent, borrowing talent, there'll be some botting and or automation, and there's probably a lot of work to do with the boomerang and bounce as well, which is really looking across the generations and how we attract and retain talent across generations. I think when I look at what's the future strategic organisation capabilities required in mining, Danielle mentioned them. I think it's technology, automation, data, and those are the capabilities that are going to attract the younger generation into our industry as well. So I think there is, in fact, a lot of opportunity, and that's the mindset, I think, with which we need to tackle the skills shortage and talent crisis in the industry.
And are you starting to see people being attracted to Oceana because they understand those opportunities? They can see digitalization and automation and these new types of skills and what it means and how they might apply that.
I think absolutely we're seeing a shift in the demographic of the workforce in terms of the spread of age. We're also seeing a shift in the demographic in terms of gender balance and other forms of underrepresented groups. And we're also seeing a reduction in attrition. And you know that all the signs are positive, but I think the way to affect that change is definitely continuing to build on our culture, continuing to pursue diversity, inclusion and engagement, and leaning into all those tough issues that Kelly was talking about around respectful behaviours. But the more we do on culture and talent, the better skills and talent we will attract and retain.
And you are tracking those changes, not least through measuring issues like retention and seeing that the changes in culture and the new skill sets are leading to improved performance in those areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kelly, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Michelle, I'm not sure if you're seeing, we certainly are, that, you know, on a lot of these issues, these are things that, you know, candidates, graduates are really sort of driving hard in their discussions with us, you know, whether they're talking about purpose and they're wanting to actually see, you know, tangible demonstrations of this. You know, it's one thing to have your statements on a website. What does that mean in practice? What's the opportunity for people to actually practically get involved in delivering on that? The other piece is, you know, being really pushed hard in terms of, okay, well, what is my ability to sort of access these opportunities to build my capacity in, you know, automation? What are my opportunities to move between disciplines as well? We're seeing, you know, that sort of fluidity between functions and disciplines being something that is being actively sought after, that people are coming to us saying, we don't necessarily want a job for life, or if we do, it's not going to be in the form in which people are applying for it now. So it's about.
So are you changing your approaches to recruitment, the actual process, to speak differently to this new generation who are looking for different types of roles and different cultures than previous people, and indeed, to Michelle's point, to build a more diverse workforce?
Yeah, and I think you have to sort of look at it at every stage in the process, from how you choose to sort of advertise and seek candidates, to the people that you put in front of them in an interview process, the you know, the early experiences that you're being given them, as well as then their experience over the life cycle. But we're also certainly thinking about, you know, yes, we're recruiting for a position in a point in time, but what's the capacity of that person to sort of move more fluidly into other areas of the business, and what can we do as a business to create those opportunities?
Can I jump in on another
Please.
one, Terry? So I think another type of skill that we maybe don't talk about enough, that I think increasingly we will need in the industry, are these cognitive or kind of human-centric skills. So not the mining technical skills, not necessarily the technology and kind of digital skills, but the ones that will help us navigate through the increasing complexities of mining. So be that, you know, land access or permitting or social license issues or whatever it might be. We did a bit of research at ICMM a couple of years ago, and this skills gap really came out as quite a prominent one for the sector, where it said that these human-centric skills, so I'm talking about, you know, leadership, problem solving, emotional intelligence, complex decision-making, those sorts of skills. This piece of research that we did actually found that this skill set was seen as both, you know, essential to mining, given kind of the increasing complexities of the, you know, the context in which we do this work, but also where human resources professionals felt like there were bigger gaps within the existing skill set. So just to say, I think that's another one where we really need to pay attention to. But it's also one that is a skill set not specific to mining, and for which we're going to have to compete a lot with other sectors that at this stage might be considered more attractive.
And so, I mean, two questions on that. One is, where are those talent pools, and does it mean looking at different talent pools? And two, how does the mining industry differentiate itself from other industries?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I'll ask Michelle and Kelly to jump in on that as well. But, I mean, differentiation, I think, I think there is a real opportunity, obviously, for the industry. We've talked about the opportunity that's coming from the energy transition, and we talked in the green room around what that means for gold mining, and I'll ask others to contribute on that. But I think we really do have the opportunity now to expand our story around mining's contribution. So, it's not only just to the energy transition, albeit that's quite significant, but it's also to the socio-economic development of the host communities and countries in which we operate, and what that looks like, and all the additional opportunities that Kelly and Michelle have started to touch on before. I think that's absolutely where we need to start to take the story to attract this diversity of skills.
Michelle, your thoughts, both on talent pool and on how the industry differentiates itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think Danielle's covered it. I think ultimately the two levers we have are culture and leadership, and leaders drive culture. I think if you have an inclusive and a caring and a winning culture, those are the cultures that will attract and retain the right talent. And if you build leadership capability, then the talent comes. It's almost thinking about leaders as talent magnets and employees as talent scouts. That's actually what does the work for you, to attract the right people into the industry and into the organisation. Building leadership capability at every level of work throughout the organisation is really going to help us reposition as an industry. But I think culture has to be the differentiator. People need to want to work in mining, and that's the opportunity, I think, ahead of us.
And can you talk a little bit about the profile of your workforce and how that's changing and what that means for, I don't know, how decisions are made, how innovation happens? Just talk through sort of how the industry, and particularly how Oceana is evolving.
Well, I think it's different across many of our jurisdictions, but I think one of the biggest shifts we've made in the last year is to really think about how we maximise our internal talent capability, and shop within really for talent and grow our own. I think that is, you probably have seen our Grow With Us campaign. I think that has created a fundamental shift where people see opportunity inside the organisation to grow, and I would say that's probably led to our improved turnover results as well. And I can't talk to the culture measure yet because the survey is out on employee experience, and we'll have a report in 2 weeks. I'll be able to tell you whether it's working or not. But I think that internal shift is definitely working and creating opportunity for people to move across disciplines, and to learn new skills, which I think is what Kelly covered as well. I think there's just so much to do in the culture and capability space, and the more we do there, the more we unlock the full human potential of our workforce, and we'll see that in the results of the organisation.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say just a couple of pieces there. I guess from a capability perspective, one of the things that we've been looking to do, recognising that formal hierarchy is reasonably well entrenched in resources organisations, we're trying to create more sort of lateral networks. So we've been building communities of practice for technical skills across the globe, recognising that you've got enormous opportunity as being part of a global organisation to tap into and connect professionals across geographies, which has been a really sort of exciting development for us. And then I guess sort of adjacent to that, one of the things we've been doing is looking to create these sort of lateral networks for people more around particular issues or identities. So whether it's creating groups for women in operations or LGBTIQ plus communities, but these sort of lateral, quite elastic networks that people can dip in and out of as they choose to identify with them, to sort of create cohorts and communities that they feel comfortable being part of. And I think those two things in tandem, the professional development, but the sense of belonging that comes with being part of those networks, helps to sort of, build on that formal hierarchy piece.
And I mean, that's great. And you go, all right, to this earlier conversation around belonging and the need for belonging. What about the people that aren't in those groups, the sort of the people that were historically more dominant in the mining companies? How are they feeling about this transition, and how do you bring them on this journey?
I think it's hard. I certainly see that through, going back to the work that we'd done with the Broderick team, without a doubt, those findings were really challenging for certain people or cohorts within the organisation. There were people that, simply just did not recognise or understand the experiences of others. And I think that, the best way to address that is through presenting people with lived experience, providing them with the opportunity to try and understand. But again, recognising that this is not something that you're going to solve overnight. It is a journey. These things always are journeys, but it just takes time. I think it's also about trying to get across the fact that it's not a zero-sum game, that gains for others does not necessarily equate to deficit for that individual. So it's a bit of an ongoing piece.
Look, I think it's a challenge for the industry in terms of how it manages this transition and keeps people engaged who've historically probably had, let's call it, positions of privilege and positions of influence through nature of being part of certain cohorts, whilst at the same time, critically, bringing new cohorts on board and making them feel engaged and included and belonging, recognizing that you need that diversity to deliver better results and to bring innovation to these businesses. So look, we are getting close to the end of our time. I hope that you found this an interesting conversation around what the industry needs to do and look for and think about. As we look to conclude, maybe I'm just going to go across each of the panelists and sort of get your key thoughts on what would be your key messages to the industry as a whole around talent for the future, and what anybody in or around a mining company should be thinking about to make sure that this industry sets itself up for success as it comes to talent acquisition and retention, and really being a leader that people will actively seek out the mining industry and want to work in the mining industry. Danielle, let's start with you.
Oh, I get to go first. That's the easy position. Thank you, ladies. Double down on efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, it's just a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? Like, why wouldn't you try to create a company and an industry that is attractive and for which people feel like they can belong to the entire talent pool that is available, not just some of it. So it would be double down on diversity, equity, and inclusion for sure. And then I think this value proposition. So, certainly for the industry, continue to push the boundaries on leadership on these key social and environmental issues that are really important to people, and for which mining has a quite unique contribution it can make.
I think the two things that I would say, I go back to leaders drive culture, and that's investing in uplifting leadership capability is going to be key to delivery of diversity outcomes, of culture outcomes, and ultimately of performance outcomes for organisations. And the second one is, I think diversity and inclusion is hard, but cracking the nut of doing inclusion in an inclusive way, that is going to be the key unlock to really getting the full potential out of it.
I've got the tough job going last. Suffice to say that I agree with all of the above, but I think that piece around listening, I think that applies to both current workforce and future workforce. So, success means different things to different people, and what is important to our future workforce is not necessarily what is important to the incumbents. So really sort of tweaking that value proposition piece to address the things that are most important to the people that are joining the organisation, and being really receptive to that, as well as being really receptive to, what can be quite difficult messages from your existing workforce about their current experience, because it's from that there is the opportunity to then grow and build and establish that culture that will ultimately be, the platform for future success.
So be brave.
That's it.
Be brave.
It's as
I think
easy as
that's a great message. Be brave in going out there and recognizing the opportunities the industry presents, but also some of the challenges, and not being afraid to tackle those. And again, as Goldfields has done, recognize the historical issues and concerns, but say this is an industry that should deliver for everybody, that should have great jobs, that should be a place that people seek to work on. Look, it's been a great conversation. Thank you to my panelists. To everybody, please do come and join us 2:30 this afternoon. You will get to see in action some of the people who work in this industry and some of the different skill sets, including digitalization and automotive, and just people in thinking and operating in a modern day gold mine in a different way. So that's 2:30 in the theatre. But please now join me in thanking the panelists, and wish you well for the rest of the conference.